With Fire Emblem Engage just around the corner, I am anticipating that a lot of people may be diving back into Three Houses, and maybe a couple of you are new to the series. And I thought I'd put together a quick starter guide for specifically people who are brand new to the series and to Three Houses. And I know that these are tips I would have liked to have known when I started my journey in Three Houses. So without further ado, these are 7 tips to get you off to a great start in Fire Emblem Three Houses. The last one is particularly a spicy tip, so definitely wait until the end. It will really amp up your gameplay. First tip, play classic mode on the highest possible difficulty you are comfortable with. I know that there is an accessibility conversation in gaming right now. With Fire Emblem specifically, the whole reward of playing a Fire Emblem is evaluating risk, because it's a marathon, not a sprint, and making sure that you're taking safe bets with your characters' deployments, with your characters' engagements, so that they can level up and gain as much experience as possible so that they can survive and make it into the end game. Your units can die at any point in classic mode, and that makes even grinding your characters to become stronger throughout the game very exciting. And when you play casual mode and eliminate that risk, you're essentially eliminating a lot of the joy that you'll receive upon completing a campaign and knowing that you got most of your favorite characters through to the end. Without that, it's honestly gonna feel like an extremely slow, sloggy RPG. It has actually a really great narrative and some amazing dialogue, but a lot of the quote-unquote filler material is just gonna feel like that in casual mode. And you can never bring the difficulty back up. You can only bring it down. So it is, I cannot recommend this enough. Start on a higher difficulty than you might be normally comfortable with. And if it's too much, you can always bring it down in the middle of a campaign. There's no problem with that. If you need to come down to normal, if you just don't play these types of games very often and you find yourself struggling, that's okay. Bring it down to normal. But I know so many people who've given this game a shot and never finished it because they played it on casual and thought it got boring, or they played it on normal and just thought it was so easy. And I'm telling you, play it at least on hard and classic mode to start, no matter what your comfortability with this particular type of gaming genre is. And I really believe you'll still have a great time. Second point, don't overthink it. If you like a character, use them, unless it's Anna. If you need an item to keep a unit viable, buy it right away. This is not a game where you have to hoard gold or overthink your team composition. Go with your gut. Just use the characters you like. There's so much flexibility in this game that you really don't have to overthink, oh, who's what class, who's positioned where on the battlefield. There are so many outs that this game gives you. It's an extremely flexible experience, maybe arguably too flexible. But this Fire Emblem gives you a lot of grace in playing how you want to play. You can definitely do things wrong, but you'll learn from those lessons and be better for it. You don't need to overthink it. Tip number 3, more actions means more experience. It's just that simple. When you're specifically grinding to raise a character's level, then I recommend not using all those abilities and fancy moves with your best character to one-shot every unit on the battlefield. During the auxiliary battles, that's your time to have your secondary units take the lead so that they can have more encounters to gain more experience. Experience is absolutely the most valuable resource in this game, and every enemy you kill with a unit that doesn't really need the experience right now is wasted experience. Ultimately, you want to make sure that your team is evenly leveled in the first half of the game. In the second half of the game, you'll probably start to use a core team that's well balanced based on the classes that they settled into. But starting out as a beginner, focus on rallying units that don't need to be rallied, on having units finish off an enemy unit just to get the experience, not because it's an optimal play. Just make sure no one dies and you'll be fine. Tip number 4, hold on to any stat boost consumables you come across. The reason why, this is sort of a higher level tip, but when you take a certification to unlock a new class for a character, if your character's stats are too low, you'll get what's called a stat boost. That stat boost will raise the stats of that character so that they can meet those minimum stat requirements. Now, put yourself in a position where you've used a stat boost consumable, say something that boosts your luck stat or your defense stat, and then you take a certification and there's no stat boost. If you had not used that consumable, you may still get a stat boost that boosts those same stats up anyway, just by taking the certification. So what I recommend is, until you're in the advanced and master class certifications, basically the classes your units are going to walk into the end game with, I would use none of those consumables if you can get away from it. These are things like goddess icons, for example. Use those towards the end of the game. You'll know when it's coming, and really give those units the boost that they need at that time, because they're not going to be taking any more certifications to gain stat boosts, and it's going to make it easier for you to level them up and get ready for your final mission. Tip number 5, don't use Anna. She is not that good. She's probably, honestly, I consider mid. She's a decent sword unit. She's got some sort of a good boon to her faith magic. She's just not good enough to take a slot in your army. She's one of the DLC characters, so she can be recruited within any of the 4 paths available in the game. But here's the kicker. She has absolutely no support options with the protagonist or any of the characters in any of the houses. So what this means is she will receive no boosts, nor will she give any boosts in the middle of combat encounters through support levels. Support level boosts are not a huge deal normally, but especially when you get to the end of the game and you're dealing with some pretty challenging situations, those boosts can be pretty helpful. So I definitely recommend not making Anna one of the core members of your army towards the end game. And that's going to involve you not using her very often in the early game. There's one exception to this. Anna does have a paralog battle that is absolutely worth doing. And there's an argument to be made that you want to level her up enough so she won't be KO'd at that point. You can look it up, see what the recommended level is, and decide that for yourself. But honestly, for me, I just kind of put her in a forest and have her run away from everyone in that mission. So even then, I don't really think it's a good idea. I would not use Anna under pretty much any circumstances. Tip number 6, and this is probably the biggest tip before my spicy tip: turtle to win. What does that mean? Turtling can mean different things in different games, but ultimately what it comes down to is, you know how a turtle, its head kind of pops out of its shell, but everything in the shell is fine. If you tap the ZR button, this purple field shows up called the danger radius. The danger radius is anything where some enemy can attack you, right? So if your unit is standing in the danger radius during the enemy phase, immediately following the player phase, there's a risk that that enemy will come and attack you. Normally, there are these red lines that predict who will attack what. You can kind of see them arching over the unit's heads across the armies, but they're not really guarantees in my experience. It's like a 9 out of 10 times they'll be accurate, but sometimes you'll get a, whoa, that happened. It can be the result of the last unit you moved changing the computer's strategy. So really, you should treat that danger field, any unit that's in there, as at risk of being attacked by someone. With that in mind, the general strategy for most encounters in the first couple phases is put out your strongest, most defensive and resistance heavy character just one square in that danger radius, and surround them with some of your friendly units outside of the danger radius. What this does, have you ever seen Home Alone? You know how in Home Alone, Kevin's always like, "I'm here, guys, come stop me." And the wet bandit's like, yeah, you little jerk, let's go get him. That's exactly what's happening in Fire Emblem. You put out one unit, once they're in range, the enemy units will start to chase them down, even if they can't reach them all the way. And all you need is that unit to survive a couple rounds of hits, right? Maybe even just one round. And then you can use the battlefield to your advantage. You can surround them with your higher DPS characters that maybe are a little less tanky and knock enemy units out. And as you knock enemy units out, because there's fewer units on the battlefield, likely your danger radius will decrease, which will give you more room to maneuver your own friendly units around to where they're going to be more protected. If there is a square in the danger radius that's on the edge that is, say, a forest, for example, or a thicket, that's going to give you defense boosts, and that's a really good place to put your tanky unit to bait the enemy out. Final tip. This is the big one. Hope you're ready. This really changed my gameplay immensely in Fire Emblem. So definitely get out that pad and pen. Here it is. When you're on the wait screen, if you tilt your controller left and right, the little sprite moves. It's not a progress thing, and you can hit B to jump. It's real cute.